All right, ready to jump into a legend.
Always up for a good story. Who are we diving into today?
ShakaZulu.
Yeah.
Warrior king, military mastermind, the whole bit. But this deep dive is about going deeper than the legends. We're talking peeling back history, finding the real Shaka.
Sounds ambitious. Where do we even start with a figure as big as ShakaZulu?
Well, we're kicking things off with his Wikipedia page.
Really? Wikipedia?
Hear me out. It's actually a great starting point. Wikipedia, with all the crowdsourced edits, different sources, it actually gives us a more balanced view.
That's true. Gets you away from just one perspective. More like a balanced starting point.
Exactly. It's like starting with a historical portrait, but like with multiple sides. And we get to figure out which angles give us the most accurate, most interesting view.
Okay, I like where this is going. So we're talking ShakaZulu, Wikipedia as our guide. What's first?
Let's jump right into the drama. Shaka's early years, man. Illegitimate son, exiled from his own tribe. It's like something out of Shakespeare.
Yeah, talk about a rough start. But you can't really understand Shaka's rise without understanding the world he was born into, right?
That's what I'm thinking. Set the scene for us.
So Southern Africa in the late 1700s, it wasn't exactly peaceful. It was like a pressure cooker. Power struggles, migrations, conflicts already brewing.
So Shaka wasn't walking into a peaceful paradise.
Not even close. He stepped right into a society already on edge.
He didn't create the chaos, he just inherited it.
And well, he definitely escalated it. But here's the thing, the Wikipedia entry, it actually highlights how Shaka initially, he was into diplomacy, alliances. He wasn't all about war, at least not at first.
Really? That's not the Shaka you usually hear about.
Right. It was calculated, strategic. He was thinking about consolidation, influence, picking his battles.
It's a side of him you don't often see. Makes you wonder what kind of alliances he was building. Who were these other power players?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right. Okay, so we got ambition, strategy, but we can't talk Shaka without talking military stuff, right?
Oh, absolutely. And that's where things get really interesting.
Right. And Wikipedia doesn't disappoint, especially when it comes to their weapon of choice. This Ikwa, have you heard of this?
Oh, yeah. Nasty piece of work.
Brutal. It's short, stabbing spear, close combat. Not like those traditional throwing spears everyone else was using.
And that's the thing, right? The Ikwa itself, it probably existed before Shaka.
Really? So it wasn't like his invention?
It doesn't seem like it. The innovation, and this is what's important, wasn't inventing it. It was recognizing its potential, building a whole military thing around it.
That's interesting. So he took something that existed and just completely changed the game with it.
Like Steve Jobs with the smartphone. Didn't invent the tech, but knew how to use it in a revolutionary way.
Exactly.
And speaking of things that already existed, we got to address the elephant, or should I say the barefoot warrior, in the room.
Oh, you mean the whole Zulu warriors discarding their sandals to toughen their feet thing?
Yeah, that one. It's a great story, very hardcore, but...
Don't tell me it's not true.
The article, it kind of debunks that myth. Evidence points to the Zulu army using sandals, especially for long marches.
So all that barefoot toughness was just, what, a tall tale?
Pretty much. Which just goes to show you can't believe everything you hear. You got to be willing to question things.
Myths busted.
Yeah.
Okay, but sandals aside, what about their actual tactics? That bullhorn formation they were famous for? Flanking, encircling, closing in for the kill?
Brutal. Brutal and effective. Like a well-oiled, well-oiled machine of destruction.
Right. So how did it work? Give us the play-by-play.
Imagine this. Thousands strong. Crescent shape, the chest of the formation. They'd hit the enemy head-on.
Distracting them.
Exactly. While the horns, they swing around, encircling the enemy, trapping them.
Brutal. No escape.
Nope. You're either crushed against the chest or cut down by the horns. No winning there.
Talk about a lose-lose situation. No wonder they were so successful. Were they just, like, naturally gifted or something?
Yeah. Oh, they trained. A lot. Imagine boot camps from another era. We're talking physical conditioning, tactical drills, all day, every day.
So discipline, discipline, discipline.
Exactly. Until they moved as one unit. One terrifying unit.
I bet. That level of coordination on a battlefield must have been something else to see.
It would have been terrifying. And, you know, it's interesting. The whole bullhorn thing, it kind of reminds me of another ancient army, the Roman legions.
Wait, really? The Romans? What are you saying Shaka was using, like, Roman strategies?
There are definitely some similarities in their approaches. Makes you think about how ideas travel, right? Across continents, across time.
That's fascinating. Okay, but we can't ignore the darker side of this period, right?
Yeah.
The Emphicane.
Right.
The Wikipedia article, it talks about this immense upheaval, devastation, all happening during Shaka's reign.
Yeah, the Mfecane is well, it's a complicated and dark chapter in Southern African history. Wars, migrations, loss of life on a massive scale.
And the article doesn't shy away from the numbers. Do we know how many people died during that time?
Yeah. It's hard to say for sure. Some estimates say over 1 million. It's hard to even imagine, honestly.
1 million people.
Oh, no.
That's just, it's hard to even process that kind of loss. It really makes you think about the magnitude of what was happening.
Absolutely. And it brings up one of the big questions about Shaka, right? What was his role in all of this?
Right. Was he the cause of the Mfecane, or was it already happening?
That's the big question. Some historians say Shaka's conquests, his expansion, it directly caused the chaos. Others say no, it was bigger than him. Colonialism, the slave trade, those were already disrupting things.
So it's not as simple as just blaming Shaka.
History rarely is. It was probably a whole bunch of things colliding at once. To really get it, you gotta look at all sides.
That makes sense. So where does that leave us with Shaka himself? We've got the brilliant strategist, the ruthless warrior, but what about the actual man?
And that's where things get really interesting, because when you look at the different accounts of him, a more complicated picture starts to emerge.
Oh, I'm intrigued. What are some of those different sides of Shaka that we don't usually hear about?
Well, some sources, they describe Shaka as a straight-up tyrant, ruthless. But others, they talk about him like he was this shrewd, even benevolent leader.
Wow, so even back then people couldn't agree on who he was.
It's true. And it's not like we can just ask, what was he really like? We're relying on these accounts, these written records, many from outsiders.
Okay, so how do we even begin to make sense of these totally different views?
We got to think about who was writing this stuff down. A lot of it's from European traders, officials, guys who, they saw things through their own lens.
So not exactly unbiased observers.
Exactly. Imagine a trader, right? He wants to justify taking over land, so he's going to emphasize Shaka's brutality. But someone who's sympathetic to the Zulus, they might focus on his leadership, how he brought people together. We got to filter all that noise,
It's like trying to listen to a song with all this static in the background. You got to really focus to hear the music.
Perfect analogy. And that's why it's so important to look for those alternative voices, those perspectives that don't always make it into the official history books.
Okay, so where do we find those voices? Time travel back and interview people?
Wouldn't that be something? No, but that's where oral histories come in, the stories passed down through generations.
Okay, so what kind of stories are we talking about? Give us an example.
All right, so the Wikipedia article, it mentions this incredible story. It's about a man who actually challenged Shaka during the mourning period for his mother, Nandi.
Wait, seriously, this is after he banned planting, milk, even supposedly had pregnant women killed, all because he was so heartbroken.
Yes. Talk about a time of, extreme emotions. And this guy, he sees all this chaos, all this suffering, and he speaks out. He says to Shaka, Nandi wasn't the first person to die in Zululand.
Whoa, that took some guts. Standing up to Shaka like that, especially then, what happened to him?
The story goes that Shaka, instead of killing him, he actually listened, spared his life. Now, we can't be sure if it happened exactly like that, but the fact that the story exists is telling.
So it's like, even if it's not 100% true, it tells us something about how people saw Shaka.
Exactly. It shows that even within his own kingdom, there were these other perspectives, maybe even an admiration for someone who was brave enough to question him.
So we're starting to see a more complete picture of Shaka, the strategist, the warrior, but also someone capable of compassion, maybe even vulnerability, at least when it came to his mother.
Absolutely. He was a complicated guy, and that's what makes him so fascinating. Right?
Totally. He wasn't just this one-dimensional figure history often tries to taint him as.
No way. He was a product of his time, shaped by those conflicts, but he also shaped those conflicts right back. His impact, it's huge.
And that's what we're going to dive into next, right?
Right. We're going to unpack that legacy, all the good, the bad, and everything in between.
Let's do it. So when we talk about Shaka's legacy, where do we even begin?
Well, I think a good place to start is with the Mfecane. We've seen how complex it was, right?
Definitely not a simple cause and effect situation.
Exactly. It's tempting to put Shaka in a box like he was the cause or he was a bystander, but it's way more nuanced than that.
Right, like we were saying, more like a tinderbox ready to go up.
Yeah, and Shaka's conquests, they were like, striking the match. But those underlying tensions, those are already there.
It makes you think about those ripple effects, His military innovations, for example.
Yeah.
They didn't just disappear after him.
Oh, absolutely not. The Ikwa, that training regime, that bullhorn formation, it changed warfare.
Other groups had to adapt or die, pretty much.
Exactly. Adapt or be conquered. It's like his influence, it's still kind of echoing even now.
Wow, that's amazing, just how one leader from so long ago can still have that kind of impact.
It really makes you think, right? And it wasn't just the military stuff either. His political moves, they left a mark too. Uniting the Zulu clans like that was huge.
Yeah, he created a powerhouse. But it was more than just land, wasn't it?
Right. It was about power, identity. He reshaped the whole political scene.
And I'm guessing that kind of change, even if it's meant to be for the better, it comes with consequences, good and bad.
Always. Some people, they found stability under Shaka's rule. But for others, it meant displacement. Losing their homes, their way of life.
It's that complexity that always gets me. How do you even begin to judge a legacy like that?
It's tough, right? Because it's never just hero or villain. It's about understanding the impact, all sides of it.
It makes you realize how those labels, they never really fit, do they?
Not really. And Shaka's a prime example. Unifier, conqueror, innovator who used those innovations, well, ruthlessly. It's all part of the story.
Which brings us back to that big question, right? Who was the real ShakaZulu? I don't know if we can even answer that.
I don't know either. Maybe that's the point. He was a man of contradictions, full of surprises, a product of his time, for sure, but also someone who went beyond that.
He's just fascinating. The more we learn, the less we seem to have him figured out.
Exactly. And honestly, I think that's how it should be. Our job isn't to give you a neat little answer. It's to give you the information, the different sides, so you can draw your own conclusions.
It's about asking the questions, not just memorizing the answers.
Exactly.
Well said. This has been an amazing journey, wouldn't you say? We've seen the military mind, the controversy, the man behind the myths.
I've learned so much. It just goes to show you, one life, one reign, it can still spark debate centuries later. That's history for you.
It's about making those connections, right?
Yeah.
The past, the present, it's all connected.
Absolutely. Keep asking questions, keep learning.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And for everyone listening, that's our deep dive on ShakaZulu. Until next time.